Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with the Better Events Podcast. And in this week's episode, we are doing another one of our favorite topics of a listener mailbag. We often get questions from you via email or our DMs, and often we get more questions than we can actually do episodes on. So think of this as your big grab bag. We talk about everything from how you build your clientele to getting people to actually attend your event. We touch a little bit on ageism in the industry and end with some fun holiday questions. So this is a fun episode, a little bit of everything, all about events and running your own business. So hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events Podcast. We are so excited to be with you this week. And just some housekeeping really quick before we get into our episode today about our listener mailbag. We are going to be taking a break for the holidays, which we do every single year, and it's about that time again. So this is our second to last episode of 2024. We will return on Wednesday, January 8th with season 5 of the podcast. So just a couple week break. We are so excited for season 5. And so there's your housekeeping notes. Make note. And now we're going to get into the episode with our conversation starter. So our question for today is, what's a piece of advice that has resonated with you this year? So Logan, can you share with us some advice?
For me, a piece of advice that has resonated with me has been, again, I'm going through some personal stuff right now. And somebody was talking about how just important connection is, and that it's very natural and human for us to want connection. And so sometimes when you're going through things, you need to look in different places. And I was reading somewhere that was giving advice about when you're going through this kind of stuff. And it said to support in and complain out, meaning in your circles of friends or your circles of how close you are to an issue, you support the people that are the closest to the issue. And then if you're going through anything on, like, personally as the person providing support, you then should actually go to people who are outside that inner circle to get that support for yourself so that you're recharging and able to support inward. And I don't know why it seems like such a simple concept, but has really resonated with me for this latter part of the year, where I feel like I've just become very aware of how I'm feeling and how I'm interacting in the world and what I need from people. And so just making sure that I'm advocating for myself, asking for connection, but also just trying to figure out where I fit amongst other folks.
Yeah, I love that. I think we all need like deep connection. And that's something that I've been realizing this year too. Like, not with everybody, but certain people like to have that really deep connection. So, I mean, that's awesome. That's actually a really good one that I could probably piggyback off of. But I'll say a different one, which is, and I don't remember who said this or if it was even something very like deep and I just like took it somewhere else. I don't know. But I wrote a sticky note and I'm looking at it over here. But it was just to be flexible and not be overwhelmed. And I wrote that down because someone told me, if you have an air of flexibility and you're just like, you know what, we're just going to make it work or whatever, that's okay, versus like really feeling like upset about something not working out or not going the way you had planned. Then it does, for me, it helps my mindset to not be so overwhelmed, because it does feel overwhelming when things don't go your way or according to plan. So just be flexible in that sense, and hopefully you can deal with those things just a little bit better. And I really like that, which is why I wrote it on a sticky note. So that's my advice.
We love sticky note reminders. That is so helpful. Great, Mary. And this week's topic, we are diving into our proverbial mailbag, because we get lots of emails and DMs and messages from you listeners. And honestly, we love you and all of your ideas, but there are way too many questions to dedicate entire episodes to every single one. And so our goal here is that we are going to get through as many as we can this week that we received over the last couple months, because we love answering your questions and, staying relevant. So that is what we are going to get into. We're going to bounce around. We're going to get into some business tips, some event tips, end with some fun holiday tips, because yes, Mary and I love the holidays. So we love your holiday questions. But before we do that, Mary, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about our conference next week?
I sure do. Our conference is so soon. You've probably been hearing about us talk about it for the last little while, but we're so excited and we'd love to invite you to come with us. One of the things that I'm personally excited about, we've shared a lot over these years. And I don't remember if we've highlighted this one or not, Logan, but we're doing some speed mentoring sessions, I should say a session segment for our virtual part of the conference where people can go around and be mentored by their peers and fellow industry individuals. And we just love the idea of mentorship and like being able to learn and teach from each other. So this is a dedicated time for that. And I personally am excited for that. And we'd love to invite you. It's not too late to join us for the Better Events Conference. And so you can check out our tickets at bettereventspod.com/conference. And if you don't see anything there, or maybe we've closed in-person ticket sales by now, you can send us an email. We can see if we can fit you in. But regardless, go check out our tickets. The virtual ticket will still be available, and we would love to see you there. And this gets us into our topic today. So as Logan said, we're talking about listener mailbag. So cue the song from Blue's Clues about how we just got a letter, because we are going into our mailbag questions. We've separated them into 3 different categories, and it's kind of focusing on business tips, event tips, holidays. So we are going to start with our business tip question, and that is, how do you build clientele when you first started your business? So Logan, you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, this is a great question, listeners. And I feel like this is probably the biggest question a lot of people have when they first start. My personal story of how I built clientele was that I worked full time at an agency and I knew I could go freelance and my agency would be my first client because of the relationships that I had with the folks I worked with. I was also the person approving some of the freelancer payments. So I kind of had an idea of what I could charge. And that I know was the catalyst for me that gave me the confidence to go out on my own, knowing that I had at least like my basic bills paid. So that's one route to take. But I also think another just tidbit of advice when you're trying to build clientele is and I wish I did this when I started, was you need to shout it from the rooftops. You need to be posting about it. You need to be telling people about it. And it can feel weird and uncomfortable, especially when you're first starting out. But I think I assumed a lot of people knew what I was doing that didn't. And so I didn't leverage my network of people I already knew from my full-time job as well as I could have by saying that I was freelance. And maybe if you're someone you're like, people can't really know, I can't put it on social, at least anecdotally telling people what you're doing and who you're trying to work with, because you never know who they know.
Yeah, I love what you said. And I feel like pretty strongly that it's something that works really well for me. And I just think it works well for other industries as well. So pretty universal, regardless of what you're doing, is to reach out to the people who do business similar to you in the same industry, but kind of different. So for example, like for us, for me, I do a lot of fundraising events. So it's reaching out to all those fundraising consultants that don't do events, but they're working with nonprofits, already consulting them. They have an opinion about events. They know nonprofits need help. They're just the most natural referral system. And so building those relationships, because those are like referral sources for a long time. So they're really valuable. And I think like regardless of the industry you're in, that's applicable. Like if you're a consultant for something else, like you can reach out to the people who I'm like, what am I thinking? Like if you work in the construction industry, it's like the same thing. You can reach out to consultants that consult in the construction industry, make connections with them. Like there's just so many services every industry offers. And so really get creative with who you might be surrounded by. And there's lots of other ways, but I love what Logan said. And I think that those are a few good ideas to get started.
And next question we had from a different listener was, how do you connect with other businesses that have similar offerings?
Oh, I also love this question. Yeah, sort of a similar mindset. I think it's kind of, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but it feels weird to do outreach to people. It's like, people don't like that dreaded question on, I just want to pick your brain. To be honest, I still use that. Like, I don't really hate it, but I know some people don't like it. Or like, how do you reach out to somebody and actually like make this real ask to be able to connect and figure out how you can help each other out? So I call them power partners. So over time, you're going to be able to build power partners, people who are exactly that. They are other businesses that provide a similar offering. And you're going to find people who are open to partnership and you're going to find people who are not. And you just, as you talk to them, you'll see who's open to collaboration. And then those people can become your power partners. But just like any relationship, you have to kind of steward that and make sure that you're, keeping your eyes peeled for them and they're keeping their eyes peeled for you and all those wonderful things. Once again, super, super valuable partnerships to collaborate with people, other businesses doing your same offering. So I'd say just reach out and you will be surprised at the people who are willing to share. And there's some instances where companies who maybe have been around for a long time or event planners who have been doing it, independently for a long time, they are at capacity. And so they need to know people like you to be able to refer things to. You can help them and build some trust with them that way. So that's what I'll say. Logan, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think again, you're spot on. I think my one would be to encourage you, even if you are out reaching out to people and getting either lackluster response or no response, to keep doing it. It just sometimes is, and by keep doing it, I don't mean harass someone and send them 5 emails when they haven't responded to you, but I more mean if you've sent one email and didn't get a response and it's been 2, 3 months, try a second time, because we've all, like, coming from where Mary and I are, like, we're busy. We could have had the best intentions to respond to someone and it just got lost in the shuffle. And so reaching out again a second time to the same person, but also then just continuing to find new people to connect with. I know when I first moved to Seattle, I felt like I had a very frustrating experience where I had a lot of people willing to meet with me, talk with me. We had a great coffee or a great cocktail, and then nothing came of it. And I actually built stronger connections with folks I met virtually, and that led to more business. And so you just never know where it's going to come from. So I just highly encourage you, like that second reach out works. Trying to reach out to different people also works. And don't be afraid. Like, you have a network from whatever you did previously. Again, even if it wasn't in the event industry, you can go back to them and you're like, do you know anyone in events that I could talk to, whether they're local or anywhere in the world, or, non-local, whatever. Because again, anytime you can get a personal connection of like, oh, maybe you were a waiter or waitress and your fellow server knows somebody who works in events, you have an in with that person much more than if you found them online randomly. They're going to give you a second look. So I just wouldn't get discouraged. And then if you're someone who loves planners and to-do lists, just make it a part of your weekly routine to reach out to 3 people just every week. Like, just make it a thing that you're going to be consistent about, because I think it's going to, turn into something much more than that.
I love that. Time on my calendar every day at 3 p.m. to do outreach like that. And I do not do it most of the days, but the intention is there. So I love what you said. You can make a designated time or a goal every day, and that makes it more manageable. I think next we're transitioning into our event tips topic, and there's lots of questions here. So the first one is, how do you actually get people to attend your event, Logan?
So simple, but so complicated. I feel like as an event planner, this is often a piece that we are asked about, but not actually executing. And I mean, I think it's simple enough. I mean, it's examine your marketing strategy. If you are putting word out there and you're not getting anyone to register, like, are you reaching the wrong people? What kind of messaging? What's the hook? What's the why? We love talking about on the podcast. What's the why for people to attend your event? I think that's a big part. And then I guess I'm interpreting this, Mary, as like getting people to register. But then also I would say to then get the registered people to attend is making sure once they register, talk to them, like email them. Make sure you are sending some pre-event communications to your attendees ahead of the event. Not, again, bombarding them, but giving them useful information that would incentivize them to then want to show up, to come, and making sure that gets out in a timely fashion. And you're not sending the know before you go, like on the event day, 10 minutes before the event starts, because it's not helpful to people. So, but I think it all comes down to marketing. And I think there's a lot of people that just do stuff and then they're confused why they don't have attendees. So I would just make sure you're going back and you're analyzing, okay, did we post on the right channels? Do we need to reach out to different groups and ask these groups to post to their list? There's different strategies. And often, again, I don't do marketing for most events. So it's more just you're consulting on these ideas. How about you, Mary? How do you think you can actually get people to come to your event?
Yeah, well, I think this is a struggle that's been hard for people, at least that I've experienced the end of this year. And so things that help, building FOMO, like if you have pictures from the event, posting those, or having people who've attended before post, because that gives like social proof. Like not you're just not telling people to come, but other people who've actually been are telling them to come. And Oh my gosh, there's so many more, but it's honestly just really hard. I love what Logan said about personal outreach. I think that's like really, really key is like making sure you're contacting the people who've already attended. It's easier to get people to come back versus getting like brand new people to learn about the event. So really, really try to do that and take time. Um, yeah, there's lots of good tips. I know Julius Solaris came out with something recently. If you looked on his LinkedIn or his website or something, that was about how to boost your ticket sales for an event. And so maybe go check that out. That might be helpful for you as well.
And I know one more on this of like a strategy that we're probably going to institute with the Better Events Conference is also like talk to your attendees that have enjoyed your event in the past and try to hone in on what are some of the real big key like things that keep them coming back. And then if you're thinking about tweaking or changing again to expand who comes to your event, maybe you keep some of those the same and have fun and play with some other pieces of that. And I know that was really integral for us between last year's conference and this year's was getting some anecdotal feedback, not just data, but just anecdotes of what stuck with people. And I think that's so powerful. Again, as event planners and event like makers, we are so focused on the doing, but making sure that you're figuring out that intention and what actually resonated with the non-event people at your event. Mary, this next one is from a listener named Cassidy. What are some mission-focused elements that you can incorporate into your fundraising event without preaching from the podium?
Ooh, I love this question, obviously. There's lots that you can do. I have, if you go back and listen to some of our podcast episodes about fundraising events, I talk about some of these ideas, but just like a brief example, I guess. If you have a photo booth, this is my favorite example. If you have a photo booth, it doesn't have to be a normal photo booth. You could do a photo booth and the backdrop is you interacting with something mission oriented. You could be interacting with animals. If it's an animal nonprofit, it could be interacting with some type of gear that you have to wear that represents the people who you're serving. Or it doesn't work for every nonprofit, but it could work for some. And so for your fundraising event, just having that photo booth be more of like an interactive moment where they're taking a picture, and then they're learning more about the mission in that instance. There's also things that you can do where when guests are seated at a table, to the point of the question, like more than just preaching from the podium, give people a moment at their table to discuss amongst themselves why they're there, or some prompted conversation starter question about how something about the mission or the organization. And for those people that are new, they may not have something to share, but they're going to be able to hear from their peers in that moment. And that sometimes, once again, builds a lot of social proof. So you're not just convincing them that night to give, but they're learning from their peers why it's important. And that's also very influential. Those are just a couple examples. There's a lot of stuff that you can do, but this is a great question and super important. So thank you. Logan, would you add anything to that?
No, I think you spot on. I think the biggest one I was going to say is give people at their table. If you're doing a seated table setting of an event, give your table time to talk to each other. Because sometimes your best advocates for your cause are going to be those table hosts or just that person at the table. And that also gives them a breather from getting talked at. So it allows also times for some people, need a little more time to think through and process information. You're giving them breathing room to process that before you maybe make an ask. And I think, Mary, as you were talking, it just to me was like the very classic, simple, but not so simple concept of show, not tell. So if you're telling people how much of an impact your organization has made, that's very different and not as impactful as showing. And one organization I think of is one that does confidence building for girls, specifically through the lens of sports. And their pillar part of their fundraising event is a panel discussion with three female pro athletes. And those pro athletes did not go through the program, but they are talking about, and they, get to answer fun questions and different things. But the through line is how sport made them feel empowered and had an impact on their life. And that is just such a fun take on this organization. So I would just challenge Cassidy, this is a great question, but like anyone listening, if you're doing a fundraising event, where is there that you can, again, show it more than tell it? So that when you are preaching from the podium, it's very impactful. Like, let's raise the paddle and not 2 hours of telling you what we're doing.
I love that. Yeah, super helpful tips. And I'm sure we could share more, but we will go on to the next question. So, from a planner transitioning into events later in life, any advice for combating ageism in the industry? Oof, good question.
This is deep. And I promise you, listeners, I think we want to dive more into this in an episode with a guest in season 5. Because I think, Mary, you and I are, both in our 30s here. So I wouldn't say that I've personally experienced ageism as a later in life person. I think I very much experienced ageism as a young professional trying to come into the industry. And even to this day, I just said this, Mary, which listeners, maybe this resonates with you. I was working an event the other day and somebody was like, yeah, how old are you? And I was like, okay, I'm 33. And they were like, okay. And then I'm looking around, I'm like, they didn't ask any of my colleagues that question. Granted, again, it was also men around me. And this person was just like genuinely curious. But I'm looking around, I'm like, I was the only lady sitting here and you just asked me how old I was. Like, it just, I don't know. It's just it was weird because I feel like from my experience, I've always been wanting to be, I think I come off older than I am. And so whenever people find out how old I am, it makes me uncomfortable. It's made me uncomfortable in the past. But I think for this listener's question, I would just say, let your work speak for itself. And continuing, we had a great episode with Erica Kastner about parenting and working in events. And I think something she said really stuck with me was, as a parent, to make sure that us as event pros that maybe aren't parents, that we are still asking the other event pros who are parents to work for us, to do things and allow them to say no, versus assuming because they have kids that's not a priority for them, so they're going to say no to your event. And I'd say the same thing as like someone who is older and more experienced transitioning in later in life. I would just, again, you have the experience. If it's not in events, it is in an events. You can relate whatever you did, project management, customer service, whatever. You can pull those things and relate them to events. And it's a strength, not a setback. But I think my only caveat would be, do be honest with how much physical work you can do if that is a limitation of yours, because there are certain roles that like truly need some physical work. And I say this even from volunteers. I've learned to make notes of like, if I have volunteers, that I have to say, this is a job that you're standing for a long period of time. And those are just, again, assumptions people will make when it comes to age. But listener, I honestly don't usually tell people my age unless, again, they ask in some of these scenarios.
Yeah, I love what you said because my dad was just telling me about a book called I think it's called From Strength to Strength, Arthur C. Brooks, and it's the tagline of it is like finding success, happiness, and deep purpose in the second half of life. And I'm just saying that because one of the things that might be a good twist is helping identify, like what Logan was saying, what strengths you do have, especially now because you do have all this like life experience. And so like selling yourself on that, like absolutely, and telling other people like, well, I'm actually super great at this because I have this life experience. And that's something that I think I would like really admire if I hear somebody say like they do recognize what their strengths are from their just life experience. And that is something that I don't have, and that's really valuable to hear. So I super appreciate that. I will say on the other side, this year was the first year that I've never had anybody ask me about my age in my career life. And I think it's because I have some gray hairs now. And I finally made the cut where nobody's asked. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, hopefully that gives you some hope, listener, because yeah, I think there's ageism all around, but yet figure out your strengths. Mary, this next question is from Christine. How much of the ideal event planning process is done online? Is it feasible to remotely manage an event in the pre-planning part?
I think 100%. But I've also heard recently from other planners that they do a lot more in person than like I will personally do. So Logan, I'm interested in your feedback too. But from my perspective, I think it is if you just set the expectation for what your process is for the event. So for example, I will say at the very beginning that we only do virtual meetings and the only time we come in person is to do a walkthrough, which I do think regardless of where your event is, even if it's in another state, you should try to do a walkthrough. Like it's just super helpful, or get somebody on the ground to like help you do a walkthrough, like something like that. So that's the one thing I would say is like pretty essential to not do remotely. But everything else you really can do remotely. Now, when we're talking about like relationship building and things like that, I do think you can build great relationships online, but they can really be strengthened when you meet in person. And so that's kind of more to your purview. Do you want to try to do like one kind of in-person meetup or something to kind of build that relationship? But absolutely, it's possible. We do it all the time. Logan, what would you say?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I think even more, I was doing this pre-COVID, but I will say even more post-COVID, everyone is more comfortable with virtual planning. I will get hired by an agency based in New York to work remote here from Seattle, and we're dealing with clients in Denver. Like, you can truly be location agnostic. I think just being open about the time zone differences. That's one thing that I had realized with one client that was really tough. I had an East Coast client that wanted to do like 6 months of pre-work, and that just kind of threw off my sleep schedule for that amount of time. But yeah, figuring out what time zones your people would be in, and then just figuring out how you can build your days around that. But agree with you totally, Mary, that in person, there is such a rapport that's built with like doing our in-person interaction. I think video calls does help you do some of that over a phone call, but there is definitely a level of trust of what we do, and that gets built so much faster with a simple in-person meeting, or an in-person on-site or something. So I think you definitely can do it, and then I would just budget to have some in-person travel as a part of your pre-planning process.
All right, our next one is from Sue. You mentioned in your day of coordination episode that some folks hate the idea of a day of person. Why do you think that is? Logan, take it away.
I just think when I said this, and Sue and I have emailed back and forth a bit about it because I wanted to expand for her. But for you listeners, I just think there are both, I say people don't like it on both sides. So planners out there don't like it because they think it kind of degrades what we do as planners, and it gives this impression that we can just be a day, like just a one day thing. And so that can undermine how much you can charge, how much you can do for your services. And if you're only charging like $500 for a day of coordination, you'd have to work so many events to have, a decent salary at the end of the year. So I know planners who don't like that at all because it undermines how much work goes in ahead of the event day. And then I also know there are like clients, and again, I see this more on the wedding side of things. The number of friends I try to convince to have a day of planner, and they don't want to do it because it's too expensive. And that's because they're looking at planners that, yes, have tried to fight that undermining that happens, and they're charging $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 for a day of coordinator, and they're getting told by their vendor, or their venue, we have a day of coordinator at the venue, and that's just included, and they're already paying a lot of money for the venue. So a lot of people then go that way, and they just don't even see the value in a day of coordinator. So that's the two sides, I guess, of who doesn't like it. But I definitely think, it's so crucial. And I have built my business doing day of roles. And that's where maybe it's less of calling myself a day of coordinator or a day of planner and being like, I am your on-site registration manager. And you are paying for me to be on-site to do, like, it's a little more like tangible of what you're doing. But I do still think it is a little polarizing. Mary, do you have anything to add to that?
Just that I think that there is like an admitted messiness, if you will, that comes with day of coordination, because you are just getting thrown into something whether you like it or not. And so I could see that there's maybe like negative connotations in that sense, but also it's like that is literally like our superpower as event coordinators, that we can go in and like rock that situation to the best of our abilities, obviously. So I could see it, but I also think on the flip side, it is something that really makes us stand out.
All right, Mary, our next final event question from a listener is, what advice do you have for party planners planning a bachelorette, bridal shower, or birthday party, knowing we are not party planners normally?
I'm sorry. I'm giggling a little bit because I definitely do not dip my toes in this. So I think there's only so much that we can offer. Maybe we can point you in some other directions, if nothing else. This is definitely a very valid piece of the industry. Just Logan and I don't typically participate in it. But okay, so for party planners planning a bachelorette, bridal shower, or birthday party, an event is an event is an event. I definitely do feel like that. So the skeleton of an event to make it success, oh my gosh, cannot talk, successful, is the same. So be organized, make your timeline, come up with a plan. I'm certain for these that you need to find really good vendor partnerships. I think vendors are probably really key for all events, but especially these ones as well, I could see. So start building that now. Try to understand their prices, their partnerships, and all of those things, because you could become really great like referral partners for each other as well. So those are my initial thoughts. I can think of some places to send you, but in the meantime, Logan, what would you add to this?
I think simply, I'm like, we love a theme. We were talking about how that helps in our behind the scenes better events conference episode. We talked about how that helped us as planners for hosting our own event. And I think when you think bachelorette or bridal shower or birthday party, you Google those things or go on Pinterest, it is information overload. And so having a theme, even if it's just a color scheme, or I've done a number of bachelorette parties for friends that I'm like, anytime we can pick a theme, it just gives us a direction for decorations, a direction for maybe the food we're doing or what to wear. Like all of those things, I think it just helps, and it can be a unique theme no one's ever heard of. It can also be a theme that people have done again, and again, and you can do it yourself, put your spin on it. But I think if I was a party planner all the time, I would encourage clients to pick a theme, because that helps guide decisions and avoids decision fatigue. And then I dearly, dearly hope that you get clients to give you a budget. because that is the hard thing, I think, with events, and one that I do see. And again, I anecdotally do this for when I have friends with bachelorettes, bachelorette parties. I try to get that group together as soon as possible via email or something and start to get an idea of what people want to spend, because that can help determine the activities that you're doing, the vendors you can use, the locations you can go to, all of that. So I ideally hope you're doing that and not just given a blank check. I think I heard anecdotally from a wedding planner, someone said like the hardest weddings to plan are actually the ones with no budget, because again, you'd think endless resources is great, but it makes everything harder, because you could choose from anything. So those would be my two pieces. I applaud you for what you do, party planners, social event planners. Not my forte, not Mary's forte, but love attending those.
And I will say, I'm trying to find it, but I'm like almost certain there either is or was a podcast that was more specific to party planning. So maybe just like do a little bit of a deep dive into other podcasts that may touch on it more. And then also at our Better Events conference, we have a couple party planners I know of specifically that will be in attendance. So you could pick their brains as well and look on LinkedIn and things like that.
Next, we're going to transition into a little bit ending here with holidays. Mary, I'd love you to take a first stab at this question. So when it comes to events, finding creative ways to say thank you to donors and sponsors that are not in their quote unquote deliverables is always something this listener is looking for. She's read the book Giftology, and where it discusses practical luxuries, a concept she loved to go back to when thinking about gifting sponsors. Some donors love gifts and others wonder why, but then others wonder why are you spending their money on them? It's a fine line. What suggestions do you have for thanking donors, sponsors, or stakeholders at your event?
Ooh, this is good. And it is hard. That fine line is most certain because you don't necessarily want to do anything too extravagant. The one thing I've seen that's popping up in mind is to make sure you get a picture of them, like the photographer takes a picture of them at the event. And then I've seen people frame it like a nice frame with like a little like label under it that has their name, like their sponsor company name and like the name of the event, and they'll just give it to them. What does the sponsor do with that? I don't know. If they hang it in their office, I don't know what they do with it, but the cost is low, but the intention is high. Like I think that something like that is really nice. And it's more than a thank you note, although thank you notes are great. Like if you do nothing else, just do something like that. But I think that could be really nice. And then just continuing, this is more like overall engagement, but to engage them in the organization. So even if it's not part of their benefits, to make sure halfway through the year that you're checking in on them, or if you're doing some cool event or community thing with the organization, make sure that sponsor knows about it so they can come and bring their team, like those types of things. That's my immediate thought. Logan, would you add anything?
Well, I feel like part of me would be the bare minimum is, a handwritten note goes a long way. We send a lot of thank you notes via email, but I do think at a minimum, a handwritten note can help, especially if you have any older donors where handwritten notes used to be the norm. I think they really love that. And I think this is a great question now too, is if you're a listener who has not done this at all this year, end of year is a great time, to start thinking about it. Mary and I went to an industry event here in Seattle that was talking about some people do Valentine's Day gifts. Again, if it's too much to do right now. I personally love doing end of year, like New Year gifts to my clients because it's just the time of year everyone's doing it. I don't mind being one of many doing it. It's just a fun ritual for me as well and puts me in their mind for next, start of the year. But I definitely know this fine line because I do joke. I don't want it to be too fancy of a gift, but I do want it to be a gift. So for me, I also would emphasize whatever you're giving, make it functional. Or if it is truly like a treat, like Mary's, I think that frame idea is such a functional and sentimental, like checks both boxes. But my go-to for any client post-event is just chocolates. Now it's nice chocolates. I love Fran's chocolates in Seattle, and they are nice. I don't think the person receiving them is going to know the dollar amount of what they are, but they are in a nice presentation, a little clear to the top. You can see the chocolates. Like it just looks nice. And that is my go-to because it's something that I know they can consume pretty soon after the event. And it's just something that knows that I took the extra effort. And I have mailed those to people's houses instead of actually handing them off on site if it doesn't happen. So it's just something as simple as that. I pick a Seattle chocolate because I'm based in Seattle. So you could just pick something also that's like local to you that is showing again that you're thinking of them without breaking the bank.
I love it. Those are great tips. All right, our next one's kind of fun. We have a question about Patty LaBelle had a viral Christmas tree lighting. and our listener would love to hear our take on the situation.
Yes. So let's take a listen here, or if you're on YouTube, folks, you can watch along with us. But Mary and I are going to react. We're going to watch this clip and then react to it.
We are privileged to have as our special honored guest this evening the dynamic Patti LaBelle. Patty's recording and acting career has pushed her to the pinnacle of showbiz.
All right, I lied. We're going to react in between because I can't handle this. Listeners, right from the top, if you watch this video, and we'll link this in the show notes so you can go watch it. It's a man at a podium introducing her. He makes it those two sentences you just heard. She's already walked out behind him, made a face like, oh no, I'm not supposed to be on stage yet, and now is walking back off stage. So Mary, I'm just going, where's the stage manager?
Yeah, stage manager.
Who let her just walk out there? Where's the show caller? Who said cue the person? All right, we continue.
Here to sing this Christmas is Patti LaBelle. Welcome.
Hang all the mistletoe. I'm gonna get to know you better. This Christmas. Where are my background singers? Woo! Oh, baby, and there's the wrong words on the cue cards. I don't know the song. This Christmas.
Again, got to stop it here right now. She was making hands. One, the music starts before it looks like she's ready. And then she is currently, if you're listening to this again, she's standing on stage. And this is Patti LaBelle from the National Tree Lighting back in 1996. This was just submitted to us by a listener who wanted our reactions. And there's no background singers behind her. And she's waving her hands as she's been singing because as she then says into the microphone, the cue cards are wrong, which would be, Mary, I'm sure, assuming the 1996 version of a downstage monitor or a confidence monitor.
I just like have instant anxiety watching this. I'm like, oh no. But the thing is, I mean, she's trying to roll with it. So kudos to her. And then I was kind of like, well, why doesn't she just sing through it? We're just going to make this happen. But then it's the cue card thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. Like not everybody knows the words to this Christmas song. Like, oh my gosh.
All right, we'll continue on.
I'm gonna have them all I can. Because I don't have the right words and I have no background singers. Oh, I know. This is gonna be a very Merry Christmas for you and me. Yeah. Where my background singers? Presents and cards are here. My world is filled with cheering you. Oh my God, this Christmas, lights twinkle all around. Next card, honey, next card. Woo! Woo! Thank you. We'll be caroling through the night. And this Christmas will be a very special one for you and me. Yeah. Oh my. Well. Ooh, I can see that.
She got her background singers.
Yeah, but are they the right background singers? We don't know. Listeners, you need to go watch this. I'm so anxious for all of this because she's going, honey, flip the cue cards faster, which is again being like the operator is the person probably standing there with posters trying to flip through them for the correct lyrics. And Patti LaBelle is a utmost professional, so she's still trying to riff and sing through this, but also making the funniest facial expressions.
You'll just have to watch it. It's stressing me out to the max. But she does work it. To my point earlier, like she is working it through, and so. But if I was there in the audience, it's so uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I will not even. We don't need to go through it. There's some more. She's just singing. We'll put the whole clip for people to follow. But she literally led on like before Bill Clinton came on stage. So pretty funny just from a production perspective. I can't decide if watching this, if I would be like, you'd coach her to be like, hey, if this had happened, like just reset, like just be like, hey, let's start it from the top, or, Merry Christmas, everybody. Let's, give me 2 minutes, and have them fill and play some other music, versus continuing. Like it just is like watching a car crash with like 50 cars where you've watched 30 of them continue to pile up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, listener. Hopefully we gave you what you wanted, which was just two stressed out event people watching that happen. Barry, we've got, I think, one final question that we got from a listener was, what are some gifts that we recommend for event planners?
I'm so glad you asked. So we've been working on something to help answer this question. So we now have a gift guide on our website and on social media. There's a highlight bubble that you can see on our Instagram. You can check it out on our website at bettereventspod.com/gift guide. And this lists some gifts that Logan and I personally use. We compiled the list together of things that we love for lots of different things, whether for events, life, tech, whatever. So definitely take a look. Like I said, there are things that we absolutely love, but anything that has to do with like comfort, self-care, helpful technology, traveling, those types of things are always super great gifts.
Yeah, I think my one I want to highlight, because this is this listener, this is the one I sent back to them, was the Renpho eye massager. It is on our gift list. I got it from a family member who I asked him how he came up with this idea, and he said he Googled gifts for people with stressful jobs. Not going to think too much about that, but I will tell you it works and it is helpful. I don't think I have an overly stressful job, but it is an eye massager. It's heated. Mary has tried mine. And I will say it is something I now pack in my on-site kit, because it is amazing. If after a busy event day, we talk about how hard it is to wind down, you put that on, it's on a timer, and I swear to you, it makes me fall asleep in 20 minutes, which is a godsend sometimes when your brain is just going, going, going. So check out that eye massager in our gift guide.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Logan. And I have a bonus tip today.
You do.
So I'll hit us with our bonus tip. Okay. So when we're talking about payment options for this bonus tip. So when you are working with international vendors, don't assume what their payment options are. I dealt with this recently, and sometimes they have different terms, or they just like don't have the same accounts, obviously, that we have. And so do they have a US account? Or how are you supposed to pay them? Is it bank transfer, or do they need to fill out like a credit card authorization form? Can you pay with a credit card? A lot of these times, they're smaller business owners as well, and so like they might not have that. And so you need to get ahead of these things ahead of time to make sure that you know how to pay your vendors when you're working with international vendors. So that is our bonus tip for today.
That is a great one. Thank you, Mary. We love payment terms and hate payment terms all at the same time. So very helpful. And that brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. And as always, you can connect with Mary and I directly on LinkedIn. We love hearing from you. Just drop us a little note that says you heard about us from the podcast. And if you want even more Better Events content, we have the 2024 Better Events Conference next week at bettereventspod.com/conference, or join our paid community on Substack. As always, thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.